So again, we appreciate everybody coming. We're going to talk about detoxification and really using that as a way to jumpstart getting healthy. Really a good idea for the beginning of the year here. One way to look at things is that we are what we take in by eating, drinking, breathing, touching, everything that comes into us. And if it doesn't get eliminated, then it stays in us. So that's what's left in us. And so if that process doesn't happen well, then we can have some unhealthy things that stay in us. And each year, that amounts to about 14 pounds worth of chemicals and poisons and pesticides and toxins that we're exposed to. So our body has to process that every year, and it's an ongoing thing, and it's getting worse and worse every year. We're exposed to more and more chemicals and toxins every day. So it's important to restore the body's capacity to handle those toxins. And so doing a detox or something like this, like we're talking about, is a good way to help do that. And a way to think about it is that your body has a certain capacity to handle these toxins or to get rid of them. You think of it as water filling up a boat or water filling up a barrel. And as it fills up, the boat's still floating, so everything's still kind of okay. It fills up a little bit more and it's almost sunk, but it's still floating. But then eventually that next little bit of water comes in and then the boat goes down or the barrel overflows. So at that point, that's when our capacity to detoxify has been exceeded. And then that's when we start becoming ill from all these toxins that we've been exposed to. And, well, gosh, I've been exposed to this forever and it's been okay. That's because your boat was still floating a little bit. But then eventually it's not. So we need to talk about what are toxins. And toxins are any substance that has a harmful effect on the body. And really, that can be any substance. What really defines a toxin is the dosage. Because even something as simple as water is considered a toxin. If we take in too much water, you could actually die. So any chemical or any substance can be considered a toxin. It's defined by the dosage. Our GI tract is the most important part of our body for eliminating toxins. And when that capacity is overwhelmed, then again, we've exceeded our toxic capacity. So our body now is being exposed to these toxins and suffering from it. Another important thing to remember is that toxins are fat soluble. And that's as opposed to being water soluble. They're like oil. If you put oil in a bucket of water, it floats. They don't dissolve in water. And the problem is that we're 70% water. So these toxins don't have a lot of places to go or be stored in our body because they only dissolve in fat. And all of us have these toxins in us. They've done studies where they've done fat biopsies, again looking at our fat cells, but they've actually cut some fat out of people and looked at it, and 100% of people have toxins stored in their fat cells. Things like PCBs, dioxins, xylene, which is a poisonous gas. All of these things are in all of us. And the other place that we get toxins is in our food. Our food now is full of chemicals and preservatives, all kinds of things that weren't there 100 years ago in the food they ate, which is a big reason why our health is a lot different than it was for our ancestors. But again, our food system really has become a chemical system. The chemicals that we're exposed to, there's lots of them. These numbers are from 1995, but you can see it's literally millions. 90,000 chemicals right now registered with the EPA that we're exposed to. You can see back at this time even almost 9,000 food additives were registered as chemicals, 7,500 cosmetic ingredients. So there's lots of chemicals out there that we're exposed to. But then again, we have our government out there watching out for us, right? The EPA is going to protect us from all these chemicals. Well, that's not really so true, as I'm sure it doesn't surprise you. Back in 1976, the government created the Toxic Substance Chemical Act, which was supposed to protect us from all these chemicals. Well, one of the things they did was grandfathered in all 62,000 chemicals that were already out on the market at that time. So none of those chemicals have been tested, things like PCBs and things like that. So they were all grandfathered in and labeled safe by the government. And even since then, this number now, as I said, is up to almost 90,000 chemicals registered, and very, very few of them have even been tested. To get a chemical registered with the EPA, there doesn't have to be any human testing. The testing is just on mice, and it's very, very limited. So the EPA is really not looking out for us at all. Things like PCBs that are out there, even though this has been outlawed for many, many years, it's still a big, big problem. As I said, when they do fat biopsies, this is in about 80% of people. It has lots of bad problems, causes hormone problems, immune dysfunction, it's cancerous. We find it in fish, is probably the biggest way that we're exposed to it these days. This is a map here that looks at PCB content of the sediment in the Great Lakes. The dark areas are very, very high. So the fish live in the lakes, we eat the fish, we get the PCBs. Again, even though it's been outlawed for almost 30 years now. So, farm-raised salmon full of insecticides, PCBs, all the artificial foods and colorings that they use in the farms. So farm-raised salmon is a really good example of something that really is not very good for you at all. We think salmon is being pretty healthy, but if it's farm-raised, it is not. You really want to look for wild-caught salmon to get something healthy. We get pollution from the air, as you can imagine, is a source of toxins, auto exhaust, heavy metals. You don't think of that as necessarily being in the air that we breathe, but especially around factories, coal factories especially, very, very high levels of mercury and arsenic in the air out on the East Coast where they have lots of coal factories. Cosmetics, skincare items, alcohol, caffeine, prescription drugs. As you can imagine, these are all toxins that we have to deal with. Skincare items and cosmetics are really a big factor. The skin is a big organ of absorption, as you can imagine. We give drugs through the skin. Lots of people know people that have patches or nitroglycerin patches, pain pill patches, estrogen patches. And in those, it's just a very, very minute drug that's on that patch, and you slap it on your arm, and your body absorbs it and has lots of beneficial effects from it. So you can imagine how much absorption you get when you rub some lotion all over your body when you get out of the shower. It's a huge amount of absorption. And these chemicals aren't, or these compounds in cosmetics aren't necessarily free of toxins. One of the big ones that we see are parabens, and that's something you want to look for on labels. That's a really, really dangerous compound. We see it in a lot of people. It's one of the things that we test for in a lot of patients, especially patients with hormone problems. They'll have very elevated levels of parabens in their system. And what that does is your body sees that and it acts like an estrogen. So it throws off your whole hormone balance and can cause reproductive problems, infertility, birth defects. And again, we see that elevated in lots and lots of patients these days. Another chemical to look for in cosmetics is something called fragrance. And that's just a generic name that the companies are allowed to label with a lot of chemicals. And when they put fragrance, they don't have to really tell you then what the individual chemicals are. But there are a lot of dangerous things. Many of these have been outlawed in Europe, for example. They're labeled as toxic, carcinogens, restricted in Canada. So lots and lots of problems with fragrances. So be careful when you see that on a label. You have no idea what you're getting. We all know water problems. Of course, Flint was the big issue here a few years ago with their lead problems. But Flint is really just the tip of the iceberg. If you look at this map, all of the dark areas here actually have more lead in their water systems than Flint did. So it's not just Flint, it's really all over the country. Flint was just in the press and got a lot of publicity for it, but it's really a problem all over the country. Elevated lead levels in our water system. As I mentioned already, our food source is a big source of toxins and preservatives and chemicals, especially meats that have hormones and antibiotics in them. Those cause lots of problems in our GI tract, and again with the hormone disruption as I described. This is a list that's called the Dirty Dozen. This is from a work group site, www.ewg.org. And that's a really good site to go to identify things that may be safe or unsafe. And periodically they put out a list that they call the Dirty Dozen, and these are the most infected fruits and vegetables as far as pesticides and herbicides. They test this, I believe it's quarterly, they put this list out. And so these are the things that if you can, you really want to buy organic, because these are the worst fruits and vegetables out there. So buying these organic is really going to save you from a health standpoint. They also publish a list called the Clean 15, which are the 15 cleanest foods. So theoretically, those are the things that if you don't buy organic, you're probably okay. They're much cleaner than these. Cleaning products is another big source of toxins in our house. Even just sitting under the cupboard, you use them. There's a lot of gases that are outgassed from those chemicals in our house, so we really want to be careful of those. They found that it only takes 26 seconds for some of those fumes to get from the cleaning bottle into your bloodstream once you open the bottle. So those things are very quickly absorbed, and again, there's blood tests that we can do on these, and it's amazing how high levels we find in people that are sick. And the air in our house is really 2 to 5 times more toxic than the air outside, unless you live next to a coal plant or something. But in general, because of all of these compounds that we have in our house, the air in our house is much worse than the air outside. This is a snapshot from that environmental work group site, showing all the stuff that you can go to and check out. They also have laundry detergent and soaps and really anything you would use in your house. To all the different compounds of what's safe and what isn't. We can have internal toxins, infections, yeast, bacteria that we shouldn't have in us. Also things like stress. If there's been previous trauma or poor relationships, we don't think of those things as toxic, but they really are. They affect our stress levels, our cortisol levels, and those things in turn then result as a toxic buildup in our system that all has to be dealt with. So as I mentioned earlier, you can kind of think of the analogy like a barrel filling up with water. As long as there's room in the barrel, our system's handling things just fine. But all day long, we're exposed to all of these things that are getting dumped into the barrel, and if our body doesn't keep up, eventually the barrel overflows. And then once it overflows, we have all of these health issues. And the thing is that we all have different sized barrels. We all have a different capacity to detoxify. That's why 2 people can live in the same house, be exposed to the same things. One is sick, one isn't. Because we all have different capacities to handle that toxic burden. Signs that you might have toxicity really can be about anything. There's no one symptom that goes along with any one toxic chemical, because they can affect everything. They can affect our metabolism, which can therefore affect our nervous system, our gut, our kidneys, your brain, can cause brain fog or concentrating problems, can cause us to be irritable or stressed. So there is no one symptom that goes along with any one toxicity. So you have to be real open-minded about what could be causing things. Again, almost any health issue could be caused by toxicity. So why do we want to do some sort of detox? As I mentioned earlier, almost all of us have some sort of toxic chemicals in us of some sort if we were to check or do blood tests or biopsies. Which is a chemical that's everywhere. 300 million pounds of it are produced a year and sprayed on everything that we eat, on all of our crops. It's in the air. You can't avoid it. It's been discovered in breast milk, so we're feeding it to our babies. And last year they did a study in Thailand, and they found it in 100% of women in umbilical cord blood. So the baby's getting exposed to Roundup before it's even born. And it's now been labeled a carcinogen in California. It's carcinogen in Europe and illegal. So it's a really, really bad compound. And we talk about detoxification as a way to jumpstart weight loss. Lots of people go through where they go on a crash diet, you lose 10 or 15 pounds, you feel great, and then you come up against a wall and you stop, and you just get off of that diet just a little bit and the weight all comes back. You just can't get beyond that and maintain it. And it's quite often due to toxicity. What happens is that, as I mentioned earlier, the toxins are because they're fat soluble. Well, when you lose weight, when you diet and lose weight, you don't lose fat cells. The cells that you have get smaller. So what happens is, if that fat cell, think of that like a beach ball, it's got a certain amount of toxins stored in it. As that beach ball shrinks, now the concentration of those toxins goes up in the cells. So your body senses that as becoming more toxic. Well, your body doesn't like that. It's going to try to fight that. So metabolically, it's going to resist you losing any more weight. It's going to fight that weight loss because it doesn't want to be more toxic. So the concentration of toxins goes up, the body rebounds and fights that and wants to get you back to the higher weight. So if we do a detoxification process, get those toxins out, now you can lose weight. The fat cells get smaller, the concentration of the toxins is actually less, and now you can move beyond that wall and start losing weight and keep it off. So it's fighting this metabolic brick wall, if you will, due to the toxins that's stored in our fat cells. How do we detoxify and get these toxins out of our system? Well, there's a couple different ways. As I mentioned earlier, our GI tract is by far the most important way, and that's done through mostly the liver, and then excreted in the bile and stool. Our kidneys are the next most important thing, flushing things out of our bloodstream, and then excreting that in the urine. And the third way that people don't always think about is our perspiration, our sweat. And that's really an efficient way to get rid of especially metals, mercury, lead, arsenic, cadmium. These are all metals that we find in a lot of people, and they're very well excreted in our sweat. So as I mentioned, the GI tract is really the most important. The processes in our GI tract that we need to maintain: digestion, elimination. Elimination is very important. If you're not eliminating, you're not getting those toxins out. And so really, if you're constipated, those toxins just get reabsorbed right back into your system. It's just that simple. Your liver excretes them into the bile, gets into the stool, and if it just sits there, it comes all right back in. It's important to maintain what's called microflora balance, or maintain our microbiome, which is the bacteria that's in our GI tract. That bacteria is very, very important for absorption, for digestion, for our health. It turns genes on and off, and it helps regulate what happens to those toxins. So that's very important to maintain a good microflora balance. And then our gut integrity, which has to do with the gut lining. We've all heard of leaky gut, which is where the gut lining gets inflamed. Normally it's like a brick wall and nice and tight. And if that mortar gets broken down, that integrity gets broken down, toxins now get right through our GI tract, get absorbed into our bloodstream, and our body can't regulate that. So that's very important to not have leaky gut. I mentioned the liver being the most important organ for detoxification. And the way that things are detoxified in the liver, it's pretty complicated, but to simplify it, there's really two main steps. And the problem here, as I mentioned earlier, is that toxins are fat soluble. Well, for our liver to get rid of things in the bile or the urine or the stool, we have to make it water soluble. So we have to somehow get that oil to dissolve into water. And we do that by a couple series of chemical reactions. And that's called phase 1 and phase 2, are two different sets of reactions that take that oil and turn it into a water-soluble compound. And these reactions happen one after another, and if they don't, this middle product here is very, very toxic. It's what we call a toxic intermediate or intermediate metabolite. And it's actually more toxic than the toxin that started. So it's very important that these two engines run simultaneously at the same speed. The way to think about this is this phase 1 engine is like taking garbage out to the street. But if the garbage truck doesn't come along and pick it up, it builds up. And so then we get a bunch of garbage piling up at the street. So these two things have to happen, again, in synchronicity and in the same speed and the same phase. And if not, we have lots of problems. These are another way to look at this. We had said phase 1 and phase 2. These are all the vitamins and nutrients that are needed for each of these phases. And it's important that we have all of these B vitamins, folic acid, B12, vitamin C. Glutathione is a very, very important compound that we need for this. And so these are all things that have to happen for these engines to keep going. And so again, if we're deficient in some of these things over here, say vitamin C, for example, then phase 2 slows down, things get bogged up here, these toxic intermediate metabolites get produced, and then we actually become sicker than we were from the toxins. So it's important that these keep going. And where we run into problems is that our foods are so nutritionally depleted because our soil doesn't have any nutrients in it anymore, so we don't get all the vitamins and nutrients that we need. Even if we eat a healthy diet, we can't really get what we need to keep this engine running all the time. Our fruits are near the nutrients that they used to have, again, because we farm the soil over and over and over again. So all the nutrients have been extracted from the soil. And then the other problem we have is that all these drugs that we take. It's not uncommon for people to come in and have a list of 10, 15, 20 drugs that they take every day, many times a day. Well, all of these drugs, as far as your body is concerned, is a toxin. They all have to be metabolized. They all run through that engine in the liver, phase 1 and phase 2, and they use up our vitamins and nutrients that are needed to keep that engine running. So if we're taking all these drugs all day, we're depleting all those vitamins and nutrients, we don't have anything left to get rid of the parabens and the xylene that we've inhaled that day either. And again, all of these drugs deplete things. The statins, one of the most common drugs that we all take for cholesterol, depletes CoQ10, vitamin A, D, and K. All the heart medications also deplete CoQ10. When we run out of CoQ10, our cells don't operate well and we get fatigued. But again, all of these drugs every day use up that engine, use up the fuel for that liver. So it's not there to metabolize other things. The second thing that we do to excrete things is our urine. Our kidneys act like little filters, filter toxins out of the blood and then excrete them in the urine. It's important to stay hydrated. It's important to maintain good kidney function. We know that a lot of the drugs that we take nowadays hurt the kidneys. Probably the biggest one that we see is the PPIs, omeprazole, Nexium, all of those antacid drugs that we take for heartburn. They've been shown in long-term use to worsen the rate of kidney failure. So we take those drugs, our kidneys don't work as well. And then, as I mentioned, the third way that we get rid of toxins is, so the way to fix that and aid that is a sauna. That's been shown to be the most efficient way to sweat and detoxify. Again, here we can remove toxins, BPA, phthalates, cadmium, lead, mercury. There's lots of studies that show the benefits of saunas. Reduces heart disease, reduces blood pressure. There was a study last year in Age and Aging, which is a dementia journal, that showed markedly decreased rates of dementia in people that did saunas 3 to 4 times a week. This was done in Finland, where saunas are very, very common. So it's time to get this underway, and we really want to get these toxins flushed out of our system. It's really a good thing to do a couple times a year. Drain the water level in that barrel so our bodies can handle more, especially after the holidays here where we all ingested and probably were exposed to a lot more toxins than we should have been. So this is important to do. At this point, Carrie's going to come in and go through the nuts and bolts of the actual detox system that we're talking about and explain to you how that works. So give us 1 second here to switch over our technology.
My name is Carrie Palmer. I'm one of the physician assistants in the practice. I've worked with Dr. Koziarski for over 12 years now. And one of the other functional medicine practitioners in the practice. And it's my job to thank Dr. Koziarski for sharing all of this information with us. Thank you for scaring the crap out of us. And now talk about where do we go from here? What do we do? As he kind of talked about, there's only so much we can do to avoid these exposures on a daily basis. And we do the best we can to try to avoid as much as we can. But realistically, we can't avoid it all. We live in a toxic world, and more so as time goes on. So our goal here is to kind of talk about different ways that we can really rev up or improve detoxification, help our body get rid of the stuff that we are exposed to. So why detox? He already told us all the crap that's accumulating in our body, so obviously we want to get it out. We don't like knowing it's there. It's not supposed to be there. But from a personal standpoint, we get some health benefits in addition. So we have done a group detox before in October and had 42 people join us, and we worked with a number of patients individually on detoxification processes. And the various improvements that we see in health include people saying that they just get more spring in their step or more in energy. Generally, many people end up with some form of weight loss, even if it's just a couple pounds. Sometimes it can be up to 10 to 15. You men tend to lose weight much faster than us women, but we generally do see some weight loss. Improvement in abdominal symptoms, and that's sometimes a twofold process. When we accumulate these toxins, they bog down our gut, and sometimes that occasional or not even so occasional heartburn is related to a toxic process, but sometimes it's also related to what we eat, and as he kind of alluded, a lot of our food is somewhat toxic as well. So with a detoxification system, we really try to eliminate or remove some of those commonly inflammatory foods. More restful sleep, clearer thinking, happier mood. I don't think there's anyone that would argue with that. And then the more subtle advantage that we get with doing a concentrated detox program is actually establishing some habits that we can then carry on beyond the 7, 14, 28 days that we decide to do a detox. As we focus so so intensely on detoxification for a short period of time, and we begin to see all these benefits, it's actually motivating to say, I can continue doing this beyond this concentrated time period. So what I'm here to do is talk about kind of the nitty-gritty, the details of a detox program that we offer here that really helps focus on as many aspects of improving and revving up that liver engine that we can. The program that we're focusing on this time around is a 14-day program, and basically we're working in 2 different realms. First, we're trying to eliminate as many toxins as possible from our diet, from our GI tract, but then we're also supplementing and flooding our body with all of those nutrients that our body needs to really get the liver revving up. He talked about phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification, and all of the supplements in the program that I'm going to talk about in a minute, those nutrients that our body needs to improve our ability to get rid of everything that we're exposed to. So the basics of the program, like I said, this is a 14-day program, and it's very simple this time around. The program's a little different than the one we did in October. Every day of the 14 days, it's 2 shakes and 1 meal. Generally, the recommendations made by the company who set up this program is a shake in the morning and a shake at night with a good healthy meal at lunch. But they say, and I completely agree, if you want to do 2 shakes, or breakfast and lunch, and then do a healthy dinner with your family, that's also completely reasonable. But 2 shakes and then 1 meal kind of helps simplify a little bit, because the food is as important as the shakes, and for some of us, the food choices might be a little different than we're used to, but you only have to focus on 1 meal a day. So it does simplify things a little bit. So the specifics of the plan. As I said, breakfast and dinner, we're doing a meal replacement shake. So we all get a handy dandy little bag, but basically we have 2 different powders that we include in the shakes, and I'll go over that in a minute, and then also 2 different supplements that we focus on. So the powders, it's 1 scoop of each of the powder that goes in at least 8 ounces of water or some form of unsweetened non-dairy milk, and rice, flax, not coconut, anything that really you like or enjoy is fine. And then we also recommend adding a little bit of fiber. I'll go into that detail in a couple minutes. And then in addition, we have 2 sets of capsules that we're doing. The amino detox is one that helps really upregulate or increase the motor capability of that phase 2 process. So as you remember, Dr. Koziarski talked about you have phase 1 and phase 2, and in between those 2, you have that toxic intermediary. And if that builds up, you're actually more toxic than you were to start with. So that amino detox capsule actually gives all of the necessary phase 2 revved up. So we avoid as much as possible getting that toxic intermediary building up on the curb, basically. And then the hydrolyzyme capsules, those are more of a digestive enzyme to help us absorb and digest as much as possible. And then, so same protocol for breakfast and dinner, and then the lunch is a meal based on clean food choices, basically. We'll review that in just a few minutes. So once again, just going a little bit in more detail, those are the 2 powders that we're putting in, 1 scoop of each. And in that, we're getting 10 grams of protein per each shake, and it's a clean pea protein based, so very easy to digest, very low allergen, low likelihood that it's going to cause any GI distress for patients. We also recommend adding in fiber to these shakes. Specifically, they did not add fiber in. Sometimes patients have difficulty tolerating some of it. But for most people, adding about 4 to 5 grams of a healthy fiber in each shake is actually going to help you help the bowels get the toxins out. So generally, ground flax seeds or chia seeds in those ratios are best, and we'll include all of this information. But as I said before, both of these specifically focus on supporting the entire liver detoxification pathway, provides all of those nutrients that we need. And then in addition, we have the amino detox. This is the one that specifically provides a bunch of amino acids and organic compounds that really help improve the phase 2 detoxification, help prevent that buildup. For us women, it's 2 capsules per each time you take a shake. For men, it's 3, generally kind of weight-based, honestly. But and then with those, usually it's best that we take it without food. So in the morning, I would say maybe even keep it in your bathroom by your kitchen or by your bathroom sink, and take it, before you get down to the kitchen for breakfast. And then, before the dinner shake or the lunch shake, maybe as you're preparing it or before you prepare it, take it in. By the time you're done preparing the shake, you should be fine to take it. But it's going to be much more potent, much more helpful if you take it on an empty stomach. The hydrolyzyme, this is a plant-based enzyme that really helps break down protein. So once again, these are taken with the shakes, but it really helps decrease the chances of gas, bloating, that sort of thing, which some of us can get if we get a higher dose of protein. So the patient kit, I've already kind of referred to, all comes in this bag. Like I showed you, we've already got these supplements in here, as well as a nice little shaker bottle. But then also, probably the most important component to it is everybody gets this patient guide. And in the patient guide, it goes over some shake recipe ideas. You can just do the powder and the fiber and the milk and call it good. I probably would advise trying to add a little bit of additional flavors to it, and it's going to help with variety. We're going to do these twice daily for 14 days. So it helps to add some variety, add some fruits and vegetables, and those fruits especially are providing additional nutrition. Also, it'll probably make it a little bit more filling. But there are just 4 ideas right there, and I wouldn't be surprised if we'll continue to add in a couple more recipes. I'll share with you how we'll communicate, but we'll communicate some more recipe ideas for you. And then in addition, there are actually 2 pages of lunch or dinner plans, and they're incredibly simple. You do not need to be a chef. You don't need many ingredients at all. It's very, very straightforward and traced out. But in addition, once again, we'll provide a bunch of other recipe ideas. But this definitely is a place to get you started. And then a list of all of the foods that are strongly recommended. And in addition, there's a section that goes over foods that are strongly recommended to avoid. We're going to go over those in more detail here in just a minute. But this all comes in your package. So, what is a detox diet? Kind of talked about the supplements and the shakes. Once again, that's incredibly important. But the food that we're eating is also incredibly important. And so when we talk about a detox diet, basically what we're trying to focus on is making meals made with whole foods. The foods that Mother Nature gave us, that we can get from a farm, that we can get from produce counter, meat counter, that sort of thing. And basically, when we're on the detox diet, we strongly urge you to avoid as many processed or packaged foods as possible. Now, with that said, we're going to talk about things like gluten-free oats or whole grain rice. It comes in a package, I know. That's okay. But I'm talking about packages of foods that have 5 to 10 to 20 ingredients on the back. That's the type of thing that we're hoping to avoid on this diet plan. Avoiding fried foods, hydrogenated oils, the amount of toxins in those alone is quite high. And then also, we're hoping to detox from sugar. We all got a load of it over the holidays, probably. Sugar and many artificial sweeteners. The artificial sweeteners that are acceptable in the diet are listed there. Some of the more natural, least processed sweeteners. And they are available. You can add them to food, or if you find some sort of processed food, you'll actually see that there's stevia in one of the powders that we give you. But really, other than that, we're really hoping to avoid sugar and any sort of aspartame, that sort of thing. And what I really try to focus, I try to advise my patients to focus on much of the time, but especially when we're detoxing, is what is my food doing for me? When I put something in my mouth, I'm thinking, is this hurting me more than helping me, or vice versa? And especially when we're detoxing, I'm really trying to focus on giving myself foods that I'm going to benefit from, not foods that are just going to sit there and give me bland calories, or foods that are causing more harm. There's actually a playwright from hundreds of years ago that wrote in a play, one should eat to live, not live to eat. But it's totally true. And it's something that I try to really focus on, and we try to teach to our patients that food is medicine and food is important. So, foods that are acceptable on the diet plan. Fruits. They're really all on the table. What we do stress, though, is fresh or frozen food, largely. Berries are incredibly high in antioxidants, also high in fiber. Both are incredibly good when we're talking about a detox plan. Cherries and pomegranate seeds are also incredibly high in antioxidants. But pears and apples have a great amount of fiber in them, high in vitamins and minerals. Pineapple, oranges, tangerines, lots of benefits from all of these fruits. Really, the biggest thing that we warn against is stay away from canned vegetables, fruits. Many canned fruits have sweeteners in them, but cans are also lined with BPA. So we really try to avoid cans when we can. As far as vegetables go, though, same thing. Really not much that's off the table. And a number of these different vegetables, when we look at what's in our detox supplements, in our detox shakes, there are powdered forms of a lot of these, specifically broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, that family incredibly good at healing the liver and helping the liver do its job. So, once again, supplements incredibly important, but so is the food. And as many of these vegetables as you can get in your diet during these 14 days, you're only benefiting yourself and helping the process. Grains. So we want whole grains. And when I say whole grain, I'm not saying the bread that says whole grain, because it's not. You're not seeing a whole grain there. I'm talking about actually seeing a whole grain and using it. So rice, it can be brown rice, wild rice, basmati, jasmine, anything that you're looking at that is, a whole grain, and you look at the package and that's all that's in there. Uncle Ben's 1 minute rice, not a whole grain. Avoid that one. Gluten-free oats, specifically gluten-free. Oats are incredibly high in soluble and insoluble fiber, both two different types of fiber that your body thrives on. But we specifically want to avoid anything that contains gluten, and oats are very often processed and or raised with wheat. So we do want to stress making sure that the package says gluten-free on it if you buy it. Quinoa, chia seeds, those sorts of things are pseudo-grains, but definitely something that we can use as a grain replacement, and then even stuff such as amaranth or millet. So everybody take a deep breath. No gluten, no corn. These are two that we're going to take out for 14 days, strictly. Largely because they are often highly processed, highly sprayed with chemicals, and therefore highly inflammatory. And as I talked about, our biggest goal is to reduce toxicity and also reduce inflammation to allow our gut to really heal and get all of the bad stuff out. And removing these two things helps expedite that process. So this is definitely something that we strongly urge you to remove for 14 days. Nuts and seeds, generally pretty much all of them are on the table. Almonds, cashews, walnuts, they're all incredibly high in healthy fats and oils, also high in fiber. But when you use these, Mr. Peanut or whatever, those nuts, lots of additives, lots of processed oils associated with them, often sugar. They taste good, but it's not what we're going for right now. And actually raw or roasted and unsalted and or salted with sea salt, those types of nuts are incredibly good and incredibly healthy for us. So those are the types of things that we're hoping to include in our diet. No peanuts and no soy. Both inflammatory and soy especially, a vast majority of it is genetically modified and or highly processed. So we really try to avoid those when we're detoxing. Dairy. I don't know if anyone has not noticed at this point, but Meijer has an entire dairy section, and half of it is non-dairy products anymore. Tons of different alternatives to milk. Almond, rice, coconut, hemp, cashew, blends of all of the different types. And all of these are acceptable, except for we do want to stick with unsweetened versions. Remember, we're trying to take away sugar. So unsweetened dairy alternatives, and then subsequently, that means no cow's milk and no cow's milk products, no cheese, no sour cream. We want to avoid all of that in the short term. And then also, the we want to avoid is soy. So that's the one non-dairy milk that I do want to avoid. Protein. What we eat, so are the animals that we eat. And unfortunately, our animals, many of them that are in larger feedlots or picked up by big box companies like Meijer and Walmart and that sort of thing, are fed a ton of hormones, antibiotics, GMO feed, stuff that they were not evolutionarily made to eat. And when that happens, the product that we get is much less healthy and has a much higher toxicity to it. So we definitely want you to eat protein. That's a good thing. It's a healthy component to this whole process. But I really stress that we try to focus on getting grass-fed beef or organic chicken, organic products. And you can get that at Meijer. You can get it at Walmart. There are options there, but it's pricier. We are giving a little bit of time here to prep between now and when we're, officially going to do the group detox portion if you want to join us. And during that time, I strongly urge, there are a lot of local farmers in the area that have great products out there for a much lower cost. The Kalamazoo Farmers Market specifically goes year-round. It's downtown, and there are a number of farmers, including some farmers from this area. Green Gardens is one CSA that travels over to the Kalamazoo area every Saturday morning. So lots of opportunities to get some good product, good protein for much lower cost. But we do want to stress on, if you're eating any sort of fish, wild caught, pastured pork, and if we do pork, specifically stick with the tenderloin. It's much lower in fat. And once again, just like fat, or just like toxins are stored in the fat in our bodies, it's the same thing with animals. And pigs have a lot of fat in them and tend to be more toxic generally because of the stuff that they're fed. Pork tenderloin, though, is very lean. So if you can get a good quality pork tenderloin, that's safe to eat. Otherwise, we do avoid any processed meats. So we're talking deli meats, we're talking hot dogs, we're talking sausage and bacon. I know it's fantastic, but we want to remove it for 14 days because there are chemicals and processes associated with those. Drinks, water, flavored water. You can add fruit to it. There are lots of different ways to make water a little more exciting, adding lemons to it, sometimes I'll do a berry blend in my fruit infuser bottle, but you don't even need a fruit infuser bottle. Just put some fruit in it, put it in the refrigerator overnight, and the next day it tastes nice and refreshing. It's spa water. But really, especially during this detox, as Dr. Koziarski emphasized, not only is this going to help us filter out more toxins through the urinary tract, which is another way we detoxify, but it also keeps our bowels moving. So the more water we can get in, the more regular we're going to be. So water should be the first thing we focus on, but herbal tea, green tea has some great chemicals in it that help increase detoxification. So that's a fantastic choice. I would tend toward organic if you can, but that's a fantastic choice. Also, bone broth. I don't know if all of you are familiar with that product, but bone broth is basically chicken stock or chicken broth, but made the way our grandmas used to, by actually boiling a chicken carcass or beef bones in water for long periods of time. It breaks down those bones, gets the collagen out, gets the vitamins and minerals out of those bones. And then you can drink it just as a mug in the morning, or you can put it in soup, stews, that sort of thing. It's actually really yummy. But yeah, that's also a great addition. No coffee. Sorry. No coffee, no black tea either. We're trying to really decrease the caffeine consumption. I know green tea has a little bit, but that's much lower concentration. And no alcohol. Alcohol is a toxin. And so we want to try to eliminate that for 14 days. As far as the coffee goes, I do want to say, if you're a pot of coffee a day drinker, and I ask you to go down to 0, I acknowledge that I'm going to make your life miserable. And I want you to be successful. So if you know for a fact that if you cut it out completely, you're going to be dead to the world, don't do that. But really significantly decrease it as much as you can. And no dairy creamer and no sugar. Get some stevia if you need to sweeten it up a little bit. So I strongly encourage everybody to get rid of coffee, but if this is a do or die, add in as little coffee as you need to function. And even try to wean it down over the course of 14 days. You might be surprised what we can do. Okay, so I'm sure there are a few of you out there right now that feel like this woman looks. Like, okay, you just took away my donut, my coffee in the morning, and my deli sandwich at noon, and my pizza and beer at night. So what am I supposed to eat? But actually, the way I like to think about food a little bit more is that it's really a nourishing, fulfilling entity. And I want you to enjoy this process. I don't want anybody to suffer and plod through this, torturing yourself with healthy food. But it really doesn't have to be that way. There's so many great meals that we can make with the foods that Mother Nature gave us. And those foods are sustaining us and nourishing us for a long period of time. It is amazing, both from watching our previous detox group go through this process and a number of years myself, how quickly taste buds change. You're craving sugar, you're craving carbs, you're craving that sort of thing right now, but literally within 3 or 4 days, people are already saying, oh my gosh, that guacamole I had was amazing. Or, that sort of thing. You really start to shift the way your taste buds react to different foods. My hope and my goal is that you really you really learn to enjoy the healthy foods that also help sustain us. And I also have patients that often say to me, okay, so now you're going to ask me to make my own meal and then make a meal for the rest of my family. But if you think about Thanksgiving dinner, especially, or even sometimes Christmas dinner, often a lot of what we have for those big family meals is a protein, turkey or ham, and a vegetable, sweet potatoes or Brussels sprouts or whatever else, mashed potatoes, whatever else your family is eating, and some fruit, and then maybe some rolls or something like that. But we really focus on real foods for those type of meals, and everybody loves it. Everybody craves it. So you don't necessarily have to be cooking your own meals and feeding everybody else pizza. I have many families who eat whole foods at every meal, mine included. So I actually urge you to kind of be a little bit creative in your thinking and try to incorporate this into your family lifestyle. Firstly, just to make it easier on you. You don't want to be making 2 meals. That's kind of overkill. So some examples of some healthy meals. Laura, Dr. Koziarski's wife, is a fantastic chef. And before our detox last time, she kind of tested and tried a few recipes. This is actually a red pepper sliced in half, and then just some grilled chicken that she made a chicken salad, but instead of mayo, since it's highly processed and has a lot of oils to it, she just smashed up an avocado. And then cut some onion and some pepper, put those in, and some herbs. I think there's some chives or parsley or something. I'm sure she's correcting me. Cilantro. There we go. Added those in. Really very easy and very yummy. Also, just something as simple, once again, as a chicken breast or even a section of pork tenderloin with a very simple homemade pesto to put on top of it, and roasted vegetables. Roasted vegetables, incredibly easy to prepare. I do it at least twice a week in my own family's house, in our own household. Get a couple heads of broccoli or cauliflower, cut them up, put a sprinkle of olive oil and a little bit of sea salt on, and roast them at about 400 degrees for 30 minutes or so, tossing them in between. The cooking takes a little bit of time, but the prep takes none. And my kids gobble it up, one of their favorite vegetables. Speaking of, so my kids actually are very used to eating this sort of diet because I changed our diet a few years ago due to some health concerns in my family. But specifically, that is a kale chip that is disappearing in my son's mouth before I even got it to the dinner table. So routinely what happens is I make kale chips, which once again, you take kale, you take it off the stem, cut it into smaller pieces, sprinkle a little olive oil and sea salt on it, and roast those usually more at like 350 for just 8 to 10 minutes. It doesn't take long at all. But that's our family's popcorn, basically, anymore, but a much healthier version. And that bowl was full when I took it from the oven, and by the time I was ready to grab it and bring it to the dinner table, he had half of it gone. But something that seems like it would be an offsetting taste for a young one, that one proves that it's definitely not the case. And I make this for my nieces and nephews all the time too. Same thing happens. So, benefits of the 14-day detox. Walk out of this feeling much better. But what we're also doing is changing our filter, or basically getting that liver up and running much faster, much more efficiently, and really kind of front-loading getting some of those toxins out of our body. But Some of the benefits we see are, as I said, often some weight loss, partially, at least because we're storing some toxins in the fat, so we get rid of that, and then our body allows us to lose more weight. But then also because we are changing the way you eat a little bit, and when you focus more on plant-based nutrition, we naturally tend to lose a little bit more weight. And it just benefits the entire body. Like I said, increased mood, increased energy. It's amazing what patients have admitted to. And this is just these are just a few quotes from some of our patients who went through the detox in October. Once again, it ran the gamut. The things that people stated they benefited. The first one, obviously, weight loss, but then she said she lost that 3 p.m. energy slump that she had. She said it's just gone. I don't notice that at all. And that because she felt so good, she wanted to continue with at least some semblance of this eating plan. Next one just felt better and didn't want to end up where she was before, so she too continued on with much of the same dietary changes. One, and actually it's somebody I know and love very well, it's a family member, but she called me so excited because in July she had her blood pressure checked and it was 134/84. She didn't go on meds. She didn't want to go on meds. But she just happened to have a follow-up, and her blood pressure had dropped a good, over 10 points diastolic, which is the number that we are concerned about the most. No other intervention. Hadn't exercised anymore, just did the detox. And then this last one is another patient a while, but he did the detox, and a number of symptoms improved. His back pain went away, more energy, but then he specifically was complaining of carpal tunnel type symptoms of tingling numbness in his hands. And he was getting ready to have carpal tunnel surgery, and after a 7-day, that program that we did last time was a 7-day detox, after 7 days he said it was gone. And he had specifically said he's a war vet, and he had specifically said, you know, one of my VA docs had told me a long time ago he thought maybe I had a lot of chemical toxins from where I was, and so he's at this point convinced that that's kind of, you know, he was able to get some of that out, and maybe that was some of what was causing some of his symptoms. He too was just elated and did not expect to see the improvements that he did. So, I was saying that we were going to communicate with you and get recipes and that sort of idea too. The way that we are going to do this largely, and don't worry if you're not on Facebook, I'll address that too, but is through a Facebook group. So anybody who is on Facebook, if you search for Dr. Koziarski's Detox Group, this is a closed group. So you ask to be admitted and then we'll accept you and let you in. But what a closed group means for anybody who doesn't know is that your cousin or aunt or grandma is not going to see this on her Facebook feed. So any questions you have, any semi-personal things that you feel free sharing with the group, anybody who's not in the group is not going to see it all. But this is an area where we will share some recipe ideas. We'll kind of motivate each other and get each other through what we're doing and answer any questions that anybody has, that sort of thing. This is actually the exact same group or the same page that we used when we did the detox in October. So when you join, you'll actually be able to automatically see all of the posts that we put up when we did this in October initially, which includes a bunch of recipes already, some shopping ideas, some hints, and you can kind of see some of the questions that people had and some of the progress that people made. You'll see sometimes when we detox, in order to get a benefit, a few of us deal with some increased fatigue, some headaches, some increased joint pain as we get some of these toxins mobilized. So sometimes it's a little bit rocky, or we're dealing with food cravings or headaches because you're withdrawing from caffeine, all that sort of thing. So you'll kind of see the journey that we went on. But in addition, I just want to be clear, the group detox that we did last time was through a different company, was a different plan. It was a 7-day plan. We had 2 days of fasting. It was a fantastic plan. We changed, honestly, more just because of supply issues. But these two plans are similar in the components to the supplements, but the 7 versus 14 days, and this plan does not call for any fasting. So don't, try not to get confused about the specific instructions associated with that past plan. It's different this time around. The food choices are very similar though. So generally what we're hoping to do, or our plan, is to do this as a group, support each other, and our plan is to start this, at least especially our office staff, start this on January 20th, and then continue for 14 days, which brings us to Friday, February 2nd. So that gives you about a week and a half to really plan, look at the foods, look at some meal ideas, and do your shopping, really prep and plan so that you're not hurtled into this, right away and don't have time to plan or think this through. So for anybody who is not on Facebook, what we are also going to do is we have an email group. So anything that's posted on Facebook that we post, like recipes, hints, clues, anything like that, we will also then automatically email to you. So that's also an option. You don't have to sign up for Facebook just to do this. Am I missing anything else that you can think of? Okay. And then one last thing before we close and ask for any questions. So Dr. Koziarski also brought up detox and sweat. And we feel so strongly about the benefits of sauna that we have actually had one installed in our office. So it's actually in it's technically a restroom, but it's a large area right over here across the hall. Feel free to go check it out. And it's actually a sauna that's technically, I think it's built to be large enough for 3 or 4 people. It's large enough for 2 people. Really like 2 other people that you want to bring in. But we have 75-minute appointments. Recommend, if you can tolerate it, is detoxing for about 40 minutes or so, and then there's a shower right in that room, private, door locks obviously, but yeah, you can go ahead and shower, because we want to, once you get out of the sauna, we immediately want to wash all of that sweat off, because with that sweat is the toxins and we don't want to reabsorb it. So showers available in there. We've also got hair dryer, soap, shampoo, all of that is in there. And for our detox participants, generally we have a certain package protocol, but we're giving $50 off. So it's 10 visits for $100. We schedule appointments Monday through Thursday, and then Wednesday evenings, this is not atypical. Wednesday evenings, actually, we're usually seeing patients, and we're open until 8 o'clock. So for anybody who can't get here during the day, Wednesday evenings are an option. I think we have 2 appointments available every Wednesday evening. So just something to think about. And as Dr. Koziarski pointed out too, it's not just detoxification that benefits us. There's improvement in brain health, there's improvement in cardiovascular health. I have some chronic pain patients that swear by the sauna. They feel so much better when they get out. But for me, relaxation. Now I'm a mother of 3, and I'm working hard here too. That is the one place nobody can touch me. Even the bathroom at home isn't safe, but here they can't touch me. So I just love to go in there and listen to some music, or go in with a book, or take a nap. It's a really nice way to just calm down and detox the stress a little bit. So just something to think about as you're moving forward. But I think that brings us to the end.